Hi there, this is Lee, and I'm giving a update on what is going on with the Dakota Access Pipeline. At my last video, I mentioned that Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka had heeded the cry of their supporters, myself included, to actually help direct the public gaze to what was occurring out there in North Dakota, far away from media scrutiny and oversight. The protectors of the water who were trying to prevent the black snake from poisoning the soil and the water and the environment, plus the violation of sacred burial grounds. They'd been out there protesting, and then the builders, representatives of the corporation, hired a security firm who arrived with German Shepherds, dogs, and they were not trained working dogs. These were not police dogs who were professional and being handled by professionals. These were vicious attack dogs that bit the protesters and then were so crazed by their handlers that they turned on the handlers and they bit their own handlers. And then that's, when they left with the dogs. We still don't know if any of those dogs were rabid because they drove off and there was no pursuit or follow up by any law enforcement official to regulate what happened out there. So it reminded people a lot of the civil rights movement, where there were dogs unleashed on students protesting for civil rights here in North America. It was that final act of fire hoses, beatings, attack dogs that just sickened the United States. That footage was shown around the world, overseas, and around the nation, and people were just sickened by what they saw reflected, their hatred that had been reflected in these vicious, violent encounters, and it made people really look at themselves and just say, this is not the direction we want our country to go. Same thing in South Africa. There was support from outside the arena of violence where people were condemning that violence and just saying this is unacceptable. And there had been a media blackout around that area. Word had gotten out prior to the cell phone towers becoming non-functional. And so there had been a cameras embedded with the protesters, Democracy Now!, who captured the footage. If not for that, the sheriff's storyline would have been that it was actually the protectors, the Sioux Nation. He would have put the violence upon them, saying that they were the attackers, instead of the security firm who arrived to that location with the purpose of attack. They brought vicious dogs with them and sicked the dogs on the peaceful protectors, and then maced them as well. So they brought weapons to the site with them for the purpose of attack. And Democracy Now! Fortunately caught that attack that unfortunately occurred. And so that's how word has been getting out. But there was still a lack of coverage, even after that vicious attack. It was known in social media, online, but not in general media because cameras had been turned away. And so Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka arrived to that location to turn the cameras back to what was actually happening there, to draw attention to the people, the Sioux Nation, their efforts to prevent the poisoning of their water, the soil, the desecration of sacred burial grounds. It was with Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka, the fact that they are running for office, that they represent a political party, and they are the sole political party who sent representatives to that site. Hillary Clinton missing in action, Donald Trump missing in action, Gary Johnson missing in action. No comments from anyone else. Jill Stein and Najmi Baraka showed up, brought the public gaze with them. And it's to that purpose, I do think that Jill Stein decided to take one for the team. Even when she and Najmi Baraka arrived, there was a persistent stubbornness by media. And we're not even just talking mainstream media, we're talking alternative media that refused to report on this event that was occurring to citizens of this nation, that they were being attacked and with violence by dogs. And the dogs were actually attacking and biting the horses too. It was just a horrific situation, and not one arrest. But, well, we'll get to that. And so Jill Stein said, you know what? I'm here. We're going to talk about this. We're going to bring attention here. She gave her opinion, her thoughts. She spoke. Najmi Baraka spoke. And I felt a sense of relief at their presence. Jill Stein went so far as to spray graffiti on equipment by the pipeline builders. I wasn't expecting that. But, and I tried to reason in my head, like, oh gosh, what was the purpose really? I do believe that she took one for the team. She was determined to turn public gaze to what was happening. She had to step out, step up, and then put herself on the line. She's done that before with Keystone XL Pipeline, protesting mortgage foreclosures. She been arrested trying to gain entry into the debates in order to speak on these issues. So this is who she is and what she's done. This is nothing new. This is Jill Stein. Check the details, check the record, her arrest record. And so she put herself on the line and she tagged the equipment, and that is what finally drew multiple cameras to what was happening out in North Dakota. There had been such a stubbornness in ignoring the plight of the Sioux Nation, the indigenous population. It did take Jill Stein trespassing, allegedly, and vandalizing, allegedly, to actually do that. She had to put herself on the line again. And, you know, she's running for office. She's in the midst of a campaign. She's got campaign events scheduled for tomorrow, likely the day after. She's going to be in Chicago, Des Moines, Iowa, and then St. Louis, Missouri. So she's in the Midwest area. And she did that. And it just goes to show that, you know, she's got her priorities, and her priorities are with people and the environment. And with Najmi Baraka, of course, it's human rights. That's his full legacy. That's his career, decades worth of work. That's what she does, and that's what he does. And so together, they went there, and they likely saved. Of course, the protests had been going on before they got there. The Sioux Nation had been taking the leadership role. But when they showed up, that's when the cameras turned their gaze and actually revealed to the world what was happening. A lot of people still didn't even know. But, you know, the headlines are Jill Stein's got a warrant for her arrest. And, you know, you kind of look at that like, what? And so that's the choice that she made. She did what she felt like she had to do in order to prevent more violence being done to the Sioux Nation. Because, you know, what was it going to be next after the attack dogs and the mace? What comes after that? What usually does come after that? Especially when there's no cameras and there's no cell towers to get a signal out, and there's drones flying ahead, and there's helicopters flying ahead, and there's law enforcement no not even lending you any assistance. What comes next? And fortunately in this case, what came next was Jill Stein took it for the team. She took responsibility. You know well it's just her name being linked. There's no warrant for anyone else's arrest but her. She directed the public gaze to this encounter, and then she directed law enforcement gaze away from Sioux Nation to her. So that's what she did. It definitely was not a frivolous event. She went there with the sole purpose of preventing more violence, and she did. They've kind of fallen back, thankfully, because of her presence directing the public gaze. Now, there had been protests and peaceful protests before Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka arrived to the scene. Sioux Nation had been there, they say, since April, and no one had really, been paying close attention. It was just under the radar. There was no public gaze turned to that event. And then, there were events elsewhere in the nation. There were shootings in Minnesota, shootings in Louisiana. There were violent encounters, here and there. There were natural disasters in Louisiana. And Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka had been traveling, Louisiana. They've been in Los Angeles, Black Lives Matter. They've been in Baltimore talking about housing issues. And so they've been here, there, and everywhere. But I think the urgency of what occurred over the weekend with the attack dogs, they did go to North Dakota to turn the public gaze to what was happening there, and they were successful. It was a trade-off. There's a warrant apparently for Jill Stein's arrest, but she did what she felt she had to do. She's for the people. She put herself on the line and joined in and used her presence to turn focus to what was already occurring. And so now the support for Sioux Nation is growing. There's more public attention. They're looking at that footage of the attack dogs, and it's swinging public attention to the Sioux, towards the Sioux and away from the builders. And still not a word from Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders has chimed in, but it is Jill Stein who actually went to the scene and made sure people knew what was happening. She's gone back on the campaign trail, but now people are more aware of what's happening. People are saying, like, how can they help? And word is getting out. So the Sioux Nation is receiving more assistance. Black Lives Matter had been out there. There's also Iowa farmers protesting the black snake too, since it's a multi-state building project. But that's what it takes. It takes people being concerned, and that's what a leader does. Directs public gaze, shows concern, doesn't ask anyone to do anything that they wouldn't do themselves. And that's leadership right there. Okay, so that's what's going on with the Sioux Nation. I'm going to end it here, and then I'm going to talk in another video about writing letters for the debate.